Hi gang. I know I haven't been on YouTube or Instagram for a while. I was busy getting married. I got married about 2 months ago. Usually on this channel, I talk about makeup. However, in this video, I wanted to talk about something quite serious, which has nothing to do with makeup whatsoever. It is about a series of crimes committed in the town that I live in, which is Bielefeld in Germany. This video is going to discuss topics of a sensitive nature, so if you have children around, I suggest you watch this another time or, in a private space. So this case involves a major influential hospital in the city of Bielefeld. It is called the Evangelisches Klinikum Bethel. For future reference, I will be referring to this simply as Bethel. Another term I want to reference at the beginning of this video is Staatsanwaltschaft, and that is the public prosecutor in Germany. Their job is to lead preliminary criminal investigations, and that involves reading files, instructing the police to conduct witness interviews or house searches, and closing proceedings and writing indictments. Perhaps a public prosecutor in whichever country you are from means something different. So I first heard of this case from Martin, who is my husband. There was a very serious criminal case about a series of rapes perpetrated by a doctor associated with Bethel. And apparently this doctor had been drugging and raping his patients while they were admitted in the hospital of Bethel. He remembered that a friend of ours had been to this same hospital and this same ward, had a doctor who fit the description, subsequently dated him for a very short period of time, and we realized it was the same person. I will talk about that a little later, but now I want to talk to you about a video report, a short documentary about this case, which was reported by Der Fall, which is translated to The Case in English. They do investigative journalism, and this Bethel case was on their radar. So let me run you through what the documentary was talking about, because this documentary is entirely in German. You can switch on subtitles and do an auto-translate into whichever language you are fluent in. For this video, I'm just going to give it to you in English. So in 2016, Philipp G., who is the serial rapist, was a student doctor in the city of Ham and was training in one of the hospitals there, okay? So one of his patients reported her suspicions of being drugged and raped. However, the case was dropped in the autumn of 2017 because the victim experienced some lapses in memory, and it seemed that there was insufficient evidence. At some point, Philipp G. went to Australia for, I don't know, recreational purposes. And then he returned back to Germany in February of 2018 to work for Bethel, which is in Bielefeld, this major influential hospital in Bielefeld that I was talking about earlier. He started working in the neurology ward in Gilead 1, which is Gilead 1. I actually visited my friend in that particular ward at some point, and I actually met this man. So back to what the video was reporting. They were interviewing one of his victims, and this is her story. This patient, Karina, she was admitted into the neurology ward, and on the second day, Philip, who was an assistant doctor at the time, he enters her room in the evening and says that she needs fluids, and so he inserts a intravenous cannula into her arm, introduces some sort of substance into her system. This is when she completely knocks out. She can't remember anything. She wakes up at 4 a.m. with some chills and some aching limbs. She rings the bell to call the nurse and finds that her bedspread is covered with blood, and the intravenous cannula is on the floor. So that IV tube that you usually see is on the floor. The nurse bandages up her arm and nothing more is really said because Karina isn't really suspicious of anything. She just thinks that, she took ill during the night. The next morning, her father comes, and during her father's visit, Karina finds a bottle of propofol. So if you've heard of the famous Michael Jackson case, propofol was the drug that was administered to Michael Jackson, and he died as a result of an overdose of propofol. So she finds this bottle of propofol in the bed. She calls the nurse. The nurse comes in, takes the bottle away, and nothing more is said about it. And again, Karina is not terribly suspicious that anything really untoward has happened. Then we fast forward to September 2nd of 2019, a month after this incident. Karina goes back to the hospital. She goes back to the same neurology ward, and this time she is sharing a room with another patient. At 10 p.m., Philipp enters the room and says that both of them need to be prepped for an MRI, and again starts to administer something to them. Again, Karina is knocked out. She wakes up the next morning at 6 a.m. and the patient in the bed next to her had woken up in the middle of the night, also with chills and aches. So Karina, because of what happened to her in the month before, tells this to the other patient and kind of, shares her suspicion that something is wrong. So what they do is they call the nurse, and the nurse calls in the senior doctor, talk about their suspicions. The senior doctor seems very concerned. He then says that he is going to talk to the chief physician. And so he leaves, and then he comes back with Philipp and tells both the patients that this senior doctor, Philipp, as well as the chief physician, had a meeting. They talked about the circumstances, and they suspect that the reason why both patients were knocked out was because the saline solution was stored at the wrong temperature. Apparently, if you are introducing a saline solution into your system and it is of the wrong temperature, it can render you unconscious. So that is what they said happened. Karina isn't satisfied with this response, so she leaves the hospital and she lodges a complaint against Philipp specifically for improper medical administration. And while we're on the subject, my friend Eunice was admitted to the hospital, the neurology ward, the same ward, and was also attended to by Philipp. Approximately 2 weeks after this incident, there were suspicions already raised about Philipp, and he was still allowed to, interact and practice. So fast forward to April 2020, which is the next year. Philipp's apartment is being searched, and his locker at his workplace is also being searched. So Bethel now is aware of these investigations being made into Philipp, and so they released him from his duty, and he also quits. In his apartment, the police find bottles of propofol. He has a stash of these drugs, and they also find an encrypted hard drive. 6 months after, the police managed to decrypt the hard drive, and they find videos of women being drugged and raped, add up to almost 100 women. So sometime in September, the news breaks that this is what happened. There is a serial rapist. Philipp is then in custody of the Bielefeld prison. And on the second day of his imprisonment, he hangs himself and he dies. So the Staatsanwaltschaft, which is the public prosecutor, they have to close the case against Philipp because he is no longer alive. Apparently, according to the German justice system, they can't proceed with any criminal charges against a person if they are not alive. After this, Karina and her lawyer brings a case against Bethel, which is the hospital. the senior doctor that was involved, as well as the chief physician. However, Bethel says that they are not responsible for the events that happened and that there was no negligence on their part and that they did not do anything that violated the duty of care. The Staatsanwaltschaft, which is the public prosecutor, they did an investigation into Bethel, the senior doctor, as well as the chief physician, and they agree with the hospital that it does not bear any responsibility. None of these three parties were responsible for the incidents that occurred. 20th of May 2021, the authorities closed the investigations. Der Fall, which are the people who did this documentary, they requested an interview with Bethel, but the interview request was denied. However, Bethel gave them a written statement. This statement was written in German. I asked Martin to translate for me. So I'm just going to read out what it says based on his translation. This statement is in regards to why Bethel does not see that it has any responsibility for the rapes that occurred. The statement reads, "At that particular point in time, there were no indications of a sexual offense in Bethel. All the necessary measures were taken to investigate the accusation of non-adequate administration of medication. The administration of the clinic, the involved doctors, and the nursing staff all adhered to their due diligence obligations." So essentially, they're saying that everyone followed protocol. From what I understand from some news articles, what happened after the second incident where Karina and the patient in the next bed to her reported their suspicions to the senior doctor and the chief physician, they checked the drug inventory of the more stringently controlled and tracked narcotics, which falls under the group of BTM. They are logged, they are accounted for very carefully. Propofol, which was the drug that the doctor used to knock out the patients, does not fall under the group of BTM. Propofol is more easily accessible by members of staff and is not carefully recorded like the other narcotics under the group BTM. They also tested the blood of the patients for narcotics. It does not say if propofol was one of the drugs that they were testing for, but whatever the case is, they did not find anything significant in the blood test. So this is primarily the argument that they're using, that they went through the chain of command, they tested the blood to see if there was anything unusual, and they didn't find anything unusual. Okay, so this is the part that makes me the most angry and upset. Neither Bethel nor the public prosecutors are informing victims that they have been drugged and raped. They're only giving the full details to victims that have reported their suspicions to authorities. That is what is making me so angry. Because if I was in that position, I would want to know. And one of the arguments that the hospital has brought up is that victim assistance institutions advised us not to get in touch with the victims at that point of time because actively approaching the victims may further traumatize them. I don't know who these people are. They say that it's not a good idea. But here's another piece of information. Upon the autopsy of Philipp, they found that he had 2 sexually transmitted diseases, which means he could have given his victims 1 or 2 of these STDs that he had. And yet, they are not planning to inform victims that they know of that haven't come forward. And this is going to affect their sexual health. This could affect their sexual health. It could affect their fertility. What if one of the victims got pregnant and simply assumed that their sexual partner is the father of the child? So this documentary team, they asked this question to the Staatsanwaltschaft, which is the public prosecutor, but they were not given an interview or a statement. So the documentary team went even further and they filed a lawsuit requesting that their questions be answered. Why are the victims not informed of the sexually transmitted diseases that they could have potentially contracted? They received a statement, a 16-page statement by the Generalstaatsanwaltschaft, and essentially the 16-page document gives them reasons why they can't answer their questions. So now a court will have to decide whether their questions should be answered or not. Karina and her lawyer are still trying to find some recourse. Other than that, he committed suicide, and so that's the end of it. The hospital is not responsible, and no one is telling the victims that they had been drugged and raped. What on earth? The only thing I can think of is that this particular story gets enough coverage so that it's on every news channel, it's in every newspaper, and hopefully the victims come across this story and think back to, was I ever in the neurology ward in Bethel? Could I have an STD without my knowledge? Could I have become pregnant from this guy? So I, as a private citizen who has not been under the care of this particular doctor, I was not treated in the neurology ward in Bethel either. There doesn't seem to be much I can do except to try to raise awareness where I can. And I thought it would be very important to do this video in English because there is a substantial population in Bielefeld, especially foreign students who might not speak German fluently, and this story may not even be on their radar. So I'm going to say this very clearly now. If you have ever been admitted into Gilead 1, the neurology ward at Bethel, contact the authorities or call the hotline, do something, find out if you indeed have been affected. This doctor was employed under Bethel from February of 2018 up to approximately April of 2020. However, he probably has done this thing before in other institutions because we know that in 2016 a patient reported her suspicions, but the case was closed due to lapses in her memory and insufficient evidence. I honestly wish I had a picture to show you of this guy because if you were affected, you might recognize his face. I don't have a picture of him. From what I remember, he wore glasses, a very average-looking Caucasian male. Talking about this from a personal point of view, I can tell you that I was very shocked when I first heard this. It was in the morning and Martin asked me, "Do you remember the name of the doctor that Eunice dated?" So I just went through our chat history and I found it, and yes, his name was also Philipp. Then Martin asked me, "Do you know what his last name was?" I couldn't find that in the chat history, but I did find a picture of his email address written on a piece of paper. That was his work email address, and in the work email addresses, typically people are given an email address with their name and their last name. So Philipp dot his last name. I'm not revealing his last name in case there are some people out there who want to start harassing family members that have this last name or something along those lines. He asked me which ward was Eunice admitted to, and I told him neurology ward, Gilead 1. And the description of the person also matched up. He was in his 30s. According to colleagues, he was very friendly and very helpful. I wasn't sure. I couldn't be sure if that was actually the same person. Perhaps there was another Philipp G working in the neurology department. So I called Eunice up on video chat and I told her what Martin had told me. I sent her the press statement, I think. And based on all of the information that we had and what she remembers about him, it fit. It fit perfectly. She also went to the neurology ward's website to check if his picture and his name was still up because she remembered looking him up earlier on when she had first met him. His profile picture is no longer there. His name is no longer there. The department is not that large. There weren't multiple Philip G's or anything like that. So yeah, she concluded that it was definitely him. Later on in the video chat, I called the number that we had for him because my friend doesn't have a cell phone. There was no answer at the end. It was just an automated voice saying this person is not available. At the time of this recording, any attempts to call the number resulted in the call being immediately ended. So we talked about it some more, and I asked her if she thinks that anything might have happened. And she said she's quite certain that nothing happened because there was another patient in the room that she was staying in, and that patient was also accompanied by her husband. And the husband pretty much stayed there the entire time that this other patient was there. And my friend does not remember at any point becoming unconscious and waking up not remembering what happened. Unfortunately, that's not all the interaction she had with this doctor. She found him attractive and she wanted to ask him out. I was there when this happened. I actually met him. She referred to him as cute doctor, not knowing what to say. I just said, "Hi, cute doctor," and I shook his hand, and he seemed very friendly. He didn't seem like a creepy person whatsoever. He seemed very likable. So she asked him out while I was there. I think he said something along the lines of he's not supposed to give her his work email, but he did give her his work email. He gave her a phone number as well as a personal email. So after she was discharged, she contacted him and they did date for a very short period of time. Any sort of sexual interaction that they had was purely consensual. She doesn't remember anything strange happening to her during the times that they were intimate. She didn't pursue the relationship after that. And yeah, we didn't really hear about him for a while. She did mention that after they had dated, he gave her a ride on his motorbike into another city. At that time, it was just purely platonic friendship between them. And at a later date, she recalls meeting him in a supermarket when she was with another friend of hers. And at that time, COVID was starting to become more serious. He gave her a hug at that time, which she found a bit odd given that the coronavirus was becoming more serious in Germany. And then after that, she didn't have any contact with him. I will say that I think the reason why this case didn't get as much coverage as it should have gotten or received as much outrage as it should have gotten was because news reports were coming out closer to the time that the coronavirus pandemic was at its peak. COVID was becoming more of a talking point on news stations, and I think that just buried the story. People were not as likely to want to go out and protest and be in close proximity with other people. So that's another reason I think this story didn't get as much attention. I am very angry at the way this case was handled. I am afraid, and I have lost trust in the institutions of Germany. I've lost trust in the justice system. I've lost trust in the medical institutions. I was admitted into Bethel once, not in the same department, not in the neurology department. I was admitted into Bethel for my depression, and I stayed one night. I cannot believe that they're not required to tell the victims. I can't believe that neither the clinic nor the justice system finds it part of their responsibility to let people know that this is what might have happened to you or did happen to you in the cases where they did have video footage of the rapes being perpetrated. This was an incredibly difficult video to do. Credit goes to Martin for his translations of some of the text that I could not translate in Google Translate. if the public prosecutor's office is not telling them, if the hospital Bethel is not telling them, then they're going to have to get their information from news sources, from social media, from news outlets, from TV broadcasts. So please share this video. Please share the investigative documentary that I will link below from Der Fall, especially if you live in Bielefeld, especially if you live in Germany. I really would like more attention to be paid to this case. I hope that somehow there will be enough outrage to compel the public prosecutor or to compel Bethel to inform victims. I desperately hope that they eventually do tell the victims that this is what happened to them. I did ask my friend Eunice if I could share her story on this channel in this video, and she gave me the permission to do so. I have changed her name for her privacy. So thank you very much, Eunice, for letting me share this story. My friend has also tested herself for STDs, so she is in possession of any information that is important to her sexual health. If there are any significant developments to this particular case, I will try to make another video. For now, this is all the information I have. All my resources will be linked down below. That's it from me, and ciao for now.